The bus pulled up to the corner, and Maya stepped off with her backpack slung over one shoulder. She stood there for a moment, just staring at the building in front of her. Meadowbrook Music Conservatory. The name was carved into a massive stone arch above the entrance, and the whole place looked like something out of a movie. Tall windows, perfectly trimmed hedges, and a fountain in the center of the circular driveway. She'd seen pictures online, but standing here in person made her stomach flip. Cars were pulling up one after another. Not just any cars either. These were the kind you only see in magazines or driving through the fancy part of town. A sleek black sedan rolled up, and a man in a suit hopped out to open the back door. A girl about Maya's age stepped out, wearing designer jeans and carrying what looked like a violin case that probably cost more than Maya's entire year of rent. Maya looked down at her own backpack. It was the same one she'd used all through high school. The zipper on the front pocket was broken. There was a stain on the bottom from when she'd accidentally set it down in a puddle last spring. Her jeans were from the thrift store downtown, and her sneakers had seen better days. She took a deep breath and started walking toward the entrance. The lobby was even more impressive than the outside. Marble floors that were so shiny she could almost see her reflection. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, and there were velvet couches arranged in little groups. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Everything smelled like expensive perfume and furniture polish. A woman with a clipboard directed her toward the welcome reception in the grand hall. Maya followed the signs, passing portraits of famous musicians on the walls. She recognized a few of them from her grandmother's old records. When she reached the grand hall, she had to stop and catch her breath. The room was huge, with windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. There was a stage at one end with a beautiful grand piano sitting in the spotlight. Round tables were set up with white tablecloths. There was a long refreshment table along one wall. Students and their parents filled the room, all dressed like they were heading to a fancy dinner party. Maya felt completely out of place. She made her way to the refreshment table, trying to look like she belonged there. She poured herself some punch and grabbed a cookie. Standing off to the side while everyone else chatted and laughed in their little groups, that's when she noticed them. 3 girls standing near the piano, all looking like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. The one in the middle had perfect blonde hair and was wearing a dress that probably cost more than Maya's scholarship stipend for the entire. She was talking loudly, her voice carrying across the room. "Can you believe they're letting in scholarship students now?" The blonde girl said, not even trying to keep her voice down. "My mother said it's for diversity or whatever, but honestly, I don't see how someone who can't even afford tuition is going to keep up with the program."
Ow.
One of her friends giggled. "I know, right? Like if you can't afford proper training, how good can you really be?" Maya felt her cheeks burn. She pretended to be very interested in her cookie, but she could feel them looking in her direction. She knew they were talking about her. It was obvious. She was the only one standing alone. The only one who looked like she didn't belong. She tried to focus on the punch in her cup. Her hand was shaking slightly. Some of the red liquid sloshed over the edge and splashed down the front of her white shirt, of course. Of all the times to be clumsy, "Oh no, honey, you've got something on your shirt." Maya looked up to find the blonde girl standing right in front of her, holding out a napkin with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her friends stood behind her, trying not to laugh. "Here, let me help you," the girl continued, making a big show of dabbing at Maya's shirt with the napkin. "We can't have you looking messy on your first day. First impressions matter so much, don't you think?" "Thanks," Maya mumbled, taking the napkin and stepping back. She could hear the barely contained giggles from the other 2 girls. "I'm Veronica, by the way," the blonde girl said, tilting her head like she was examining a curious insect. "Veronica Ashford. My mother is Patricia Ashford. Maybe you've heard of her? She's played at Carnegie Hall 3 times. Maya had heard of Patricia Ashford. Everyone who knew anything about classical piano had heard of her. She was legendary. "I'm Maya," she said quietly. "Oh, how nice," Veronica said in that same fake sweet voice. "And where did you study before this?" "I learned from my grandmother mostly." The 3 girls exchanged glances. Veronica's smile got even wider, which somehow made it look even less genuine. "Your grandmother. How sweet. I'm sure that was lovely." I've had private instructors since I was 4, but I'm sure learning from family has its own charm. Before Maya could respond, a man in a suit stepped up to a microphone on the stage. The room gradually quieted down as he began to speak. Welcome everyone, to Meadowbrook Music Conservatory. I'm Director Hammond, and I'm thrilled to see so many talented young musicians joining us this semester. Maya tried to focus on his words, but she was painfully aware of Veronica and her friends whispering and glancing in her direction every few seconds. As is tradition, Director Hammond continued, all of our new students will have the opportunity to perform at this Friday's Welcome Showcase. This gives our faculty a chance to see what you're capable of, and it's a wonderful way for you to introduce yourselves to your fellow students. Maya's stomach dropped. Friday. That was only 3 days away. Performance. Assignments will be posted outside the main practice hall by end of day tomorrow, Hammond said. We encourage you to choose pieces that showcase your abilities. Remember, this is your chance to make a strong first impression. The microphone clicked off, and the room buzzed with excited chatter. Maya heard Veronica's voice cutting through the noise. A showcase already? Well, that should be interesting. I wonder if scholarship students even have proper performance attire. I mean, if they can't afford tuition. 1. Her friends cut her off with a loud laugh. Maybe she'll play in her jeans and stained shirt. Very avant-garde. Maya felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back hard. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not in front of these people. She dumped her punch cup in the trash and headed for the exit. Keeping her head down, as she pushed through the heavy doors and stepped into the hallway, she could still hear Veronica's voice echoing behind her. The confidence in that voice, the casual cruelty of it, the assumption that someone like Maya didn't belong here. Maya found a bathroom and locked herself in a stall. She sat down on the closed toilet lid and put her face in her hands. What was she doing here? Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong. Everyone else had fancy clothes and famous parents and private instructors. She had a dead grandmother's old piano, lessons, and a backpack with a broken zipper. But then she thought about her grandmother. About the way her weathered hands had moved across the keys of that old upright piano in her tiny apartment. About the hours and hours they'd spent together, her grandmother, patient and kind, teaching her not just how to play, but how to feel the music. Music doesn't care about your bank account, Mia, her grandmother used to say. It only cares about what's in your heart. Maya took a deep breath and stood up. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her shirt was still stained with red punch. Her hair was a little messy from the wind outside. But her eyes were determined. She had 3 days to prepare for the showcase. 3 days to prove that she belonged here just as much as Veronica Ashford and all her wealthy friends. 3 days to show them that real talent didn't come from expensive instructors and fancy practice rooms. It came from the heart. Maya splashed some cold water on her face, dried her hands, and walked out of that bathroom with her head held high. She had work to do. The alarm on Maya's phone went off at 5:30 in the morning. She'd barely slept, tossing and turning all night thinking about the showcase. 3 days felt like both too much time and not nearly enough. She threw on some clothes and grabbed her backpack, heading out while the dorm hallway was still dark and quiet. The practice rooms were in a separate building connected to the main conservatory by a covered walkway. Maya had studied the campus map the night before, memorizing every turn. She wanted to get there early, before anyone else showed up. The last thing she needed was more comments from Veronica and her friends. She used her student ID card to unlock the practice hall entrance. The lights flickered on automatically as she stepped inside. The hallway was lined with small practice rooms, each one with a window in the door and a piano inside. Some were uprights, but a few had beautiful grand pianos. Maya headed for room 7, which she'd scoped out yesterday. It had a Steinway grand, and the room had good acoustics. She settled onto the piano bench and placed her hands on the keys. They were cool and smooth under her fingers. For a moment, she just sat there, breathing in the silence. Then she began to play, warming up with scales and arpeggios. Her grandmother had drilled these into her since she was 6 years old. Scales are like vegetables, Mia, her grandmother used to say. Nobody gets excited about them, but they make everything else work better. Maya smiled at the memory and kept playing, letting her fingers remember the patterns. She was so focused on her practice that she didn't hear the door open behind her. Wow, you're here early. Maya jumped, her hands hitting a jarring cluster of notes. She spun around to find a guy about her age standing in the doorway. He had messy dark hair and was carrying a coffee cup in one hand and sheet music in the other. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, he said with an apologetic smile. I'm Leo. I usually have this room reserved at 6, but you're welcome to finish up. I can come back in 20 minutes. Oh, no. It's okay, Maya said, starting to gather her things. I should have checked the reservation schedule. Hey, wait, Leo said, stepping into the room. Were you just playing Batch? The Prelude in C minor. Maya nodded, feeling self-conscious. That was really good, he said, and he sounded genuine. Like really good. Are you new here? I don't think I've seen you before. Yeah, first semester. I'm Maya. Cool. Well, welcome to Meadowbrook, Maya. Fair warning, though, this place can be kind of intense. Lots of competition, lots of egos. He rolled his eyes. But there are some decent people here, too. You just have to find them. Maya found herself smiling. It was nice to have someone talk to her like a normal person instead of looking at her like she was some kind of charity case. Thanks, she said. I'm starting to figure that out. Leo glanced at his watch. Hey, are you going to breakfast after this? The dining hall opens at 7. I could show you around if you want. Introduce you to some people who aren't total snobs. That would be great, actually. Over the next 2 days, Maya fell into a routine. She'd wake up early, practice for 2 hours before classes, then attend lectures and workshops throughout the day. The classes were challenging but exciting. Music theory, composition, piano technique, music history. Her professors were demanding but fair, and for the first time in her life, she was surrounded by people who understood that music was more than just a hobby. But everywhere she went, she felt Veronica's eyes on her. In music theory class, when Maya correctly answered a question about chord progressions, she heard Veronica whisper to her friend, "Must have gotten lucky." During lunch, when Maya sat with Leo and a few other friendly students in the courtyard, Veronica walked past with her group and made a point of staring at Maya's homemade sandwich. Is she always like that? Maya asked Leo after Veronica had passed. Leo took a bite of his apple and nodded. Pretty much. Veronica Ashford. Her mom's famous, so she thinks she's royalty around here. She's technically very good, I'll give her that. But she's got no soul in her playing. It's all technique, no heart. It's harsh. One of the other students, a violinist named Beth, said. But she was smiling. It's also completely true. Just ignore her, Leo advised. She feeds on getting reactions from people. The best thing you can do is show her up at the showcase. No pressure or anything, Maya said with a nervous laugh. Thursday afternoon? The performance list was finally posted outside the main practice hall. A crowd of students gathered around it, pushing and jostling to see where they'd been placed in the lineup. Maya hung back, waiting for the crowd to thin out. When she finally got close enough to read the list, her heart sank. She was scheduled dead last. Right after Veronica Ashford, Maya's hands shook as she pulled out her phone to take a picture of the schedule. This couldn't be a coincidence. Last place meant everyone would be comparing her performance directly to Veronica's. It meant all the anticipation and energy in the room would be building up. And then she'd have to follow whatever Veronica played. She turned to leave and nearly ran straight into Veronica, who was standing right behind her with her arms crossed. Oh, good. You saw, Veronica said with that fake smile. I'm right before you. How exciting. I'm playing Rachmaninoff, by the way. The Prelude in C-sharp minor. It's quite challenging, but I've been working on it with my private instructor for months. One of Veronica's friends peered at the list. What are you playing, Maya? Maya hadn't told anyone what piece she'd chosen. She'd been practicing it in secret, showing up early in the morning when no one else was around. I haven't decided yet, she lied. Veronica laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. You haven't decided? The showcase is tomorrow. You know what? That's fine. I'm sure whatever you play will be lovely. Maybe something simple? Faralise is always a crowd pleaser. Her friends giggled on cue. Maya felt her face burning, but she forced herself to stay calm. I'll figure it out, she said quietly, and walked away before they could see the tears building in her eyes. That night, Maya couldn't concentrate on anything. She tried to practice, but her fingers felt clumsy on the keys. She tried to do homework, but the words swam on the page. Finally, she gave up and just lay on her bed. Staring at the ceiling of her tiny dorm room, her phone buzzed with a text from her mom. Good luck tomorrow, baby. Your abuela would be so proud of you. Maya felt the tears finally spill over. She pulled out the only photo she had of her grandmother, the one she kept tucked into the corner of her mirror. It was old and faded, showing a small woman with silver hair sitting at an ancient upright piano, her hands frozen mid-movement over the keys. Her grandmother's apartment had been barely bigger than Maya's current dorm room. The piano had been old even then, with ivory keys that had yellowed with age, and a few notes that stuck when you played them. But her grandmother had made magic on that piano. She'd never performed at Carnegie Hall. She'd never won competitions or taught at fancy conservatories. She'd cleaned houses for a living, coming home exhausted every night. But after dinner, she'd sit at that piano and play, and the whole world would disappear. Maya remembered being 7 years old, sitting next to her grandmother on that creaky piano bench, watching those weathered hands move across the keys like water flowing over stones. "Hey, Mia, listen," her grandmother had said. "The rich people I clean for, they have pianos 3 times as expensive as this one. Big, beautiful pianos that cost more than I make in 5 years. But you know what? Most of them never even touch those pianos. They sit there like fancy furniture, collecting dust. But this piano here? This piano has music in it because we give it music. We give it our love, our sadness, our joy. That's what makes music real. Not money. Not fancy schools. Just this." She'd placed her hand over Maya's heart. "What's in here?" Maya wiped her eyes and looked at her grandmother's photo. "I don't know if I can do this, abuela," she whispered. "They all think I don't belong here." Maybe they're right. But even as she said it, she knew her grandmother would have laughed at that. Would have told her that doubt was just fear wearing a different costume. Would have told her to stop worrying about what other people thought and just play. Maya got up and looked out her window. It was past midnight, but she could see the practice hall in the distance, lit up like a beacon. She grabbed her backpack and her ID card and headed out into the night. The campus was quiet and dark. Security lights cast long shadows across the pathways. Maya let herself into the practice hall and made her way to room 7. She didn't turn on all the lights, just the small lamp that sat on top of the piano. It created a warm circle of light that made the rest of the room fade into shadow. She sat down at the piano and took a deep breath. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. Not the piece she'd been practicing for the showcase. Not scales or exercises. Just music. The songs her grandmother used to play. Old melodies that spoke of heartbreak and hope, of long journeys and homecomings. Songs that had traveled across oceans and generations. Maya lost track of time. She played until her hands ached, until the darkness outside started to lighten with the first hints of dawn. And somewhere in those hours, she stopped being afraid. She remembered why she was here. Not to prove anything to Veronica or anyone else. Not to fit in with the wealthy students or impress the faculty. She was here because music was in her bones. Because her grandmother had given her this gift, and the only way to honor that gift was to share it, no matter how scared she felt. The sun was coming up when Maya finally stopped playing. Her fingers were sore, her back was stiff from sitting so long, but her heart felt light for the first time since she'd arrived at Mead Road. Today was the showcase. Today was the day she'd show them all what music really meant. Maya stood up, stretched, and headed back to her dorm to get ready. Whatever happened today, she would play from her heart. That's all her grandmother had ever asked of her. That's all that really mattered. Maya stood in front of her closet, staring at the handful of clothes hanging there. The showcase started at 7 that evening, which gave her exactly 8 hours to get through classes, practice one more time, somehow figure out what to wear. She'd known this was going to be a problem. All the other students would show up in expensive performance attire. The girls would have elegant dresses, probably custom made. And the guys would wear suits that cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe combined. She pulled out the 3 dresses she owned. One was a sundress she'd worn to her high school graduation. Too casual. One was a black dress she'd worn to her grandmother's funeral. She couldn't wear that. Too many memories, too much sadness. The third option was a navy blue dress she'd bought at Target 2 years ago for a cousin's wedding. It was simple, maybe too simple, but it was the best she had. She held it up to herself in the mirror and sighed. It would have to do. There was a knock at her door. Maya opened it to find her Ra, a senior named Christina, holding a garment bag. "Hey, Maya, right?" Christina said with a warm smile. "I heard through the grapevine that you're performing tonight. I also heard you might need something to wear." Maya felt her cheeks flush. "Oh, I have something." "It's not fancy, but girl, stop," Christina interrupted, pushing her way into the room. "I was in your shoes 3 years ago. Scholarship student, first showcase, terrified out of my mind. My Ra lent me a dress, and I'm paying it forward." She unzipped the garment bag to reveal a beautiful deep green dress. Simple but elegant, with a fitted bodice and a flowing skirt that would move nicely on stage. "I can't," Maya said, even though her hands were itching to touch the soft fabric. "What if I spill something on it or then you spill something on it?" Christina said, draping the dress over Maya's desk chair. "It's just a dress. But performing in something that makes you feel confident? That's worth way more than any piece of fabric. Trust me on this." Maya felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Thank you. Really, this is so kind." Christina squeezed her shoulder. "You're going to be great tonight. I can tell. Now go to your classes and stop worrying about the dress. That part's handled." The morning classes dragged on forever. Maya couldn't focus on anything. Her music history professor was lecturing about the Romantic period, which would normally fascinate her, but today the words just floated past without sticking. She kept glancing at the clock, watching the minutes tick by at lunch. Leo found her sitting alone in the courtyard again, picking at a sandwich she couldn't taste. "You look like you're about to throw up," he observed, sitting down next to her. "That's actually a good sign. Means you care." "I'm terrified," Maya admitted. "Like, can't eat, can't think, want to run away, and never come back. Terrified." "Yeah, that's normal," Leo said cheerfully. "I threw up twice before my first showcase. Once in the bathroom, once in a trash can backstage. Not my finest moment." Despite her anxiety, Maya laughed. "That's supposed to make me feel better? The point is, I survived. You'll survive too. And hey, unlike me, you probably won't vomit on anyone's shoes. The bar is so low." "That's the spirit," Leo grinned. He pulled out his phone and showed her a video. "Here, watch this. It's Vladimir Horowitz, one of the greatest pianists ever, talking about stage fright. Even he got nervous before performances. Even at the height of his career, Maya watched the elderly pianist talking about how his hands would shake before walking on stage. How he'd have to talk himself through it every single time. Somehow, knowing that even legends got scared made her feel slightly less alone in her terror. The afternoon practice session didn't go well. Maya's fingers felt stiff, and she kept making stupid mistakes in passages she'd played perfectly 100 times before. She tried to run through her piece one more time, but halfway through, she hit a wrong note and stopped. Frustrated. "Don't," a voice said from the doorway. Maya turned to see Professor Chen, one of the piano instructors, standing there with her arms crossed. She was a petite woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper reputation. She didn't accept excuses or tolerate lazy practice habits. "Don't what?" Maya asked. "Don't overpractice the day of a performance," Professor Chen said, walking into the room. "You know this piece? Your fingers know it. Your muscle memory knows it. All you're doing right now is psyching yourself out and making yourself more tired. But I keep making mistakes because you're exhausted and anxious. That's not going to get better by drilling the piece 50 more times. Professor Chen sat down next to her on the piano bench. Tell me something. Why did you choose this particular piece? Maya had been wondering when someone would ask her that. She'd kept her choice secret from everyone, even Leo. My grandmother used to play it. It was her favorite. Liszt's La Campanella, Professor Chen said, and Maya's eyes widened. Yes, I saw your practice schedule. I know what you've been working on. It's an ambitious choice. Probably the most technically difficult piece anyone's playing tonight. Everyone keeps saying I'm going to play something simple, Maya said quietly. Veronica told people I'd probably play Fr Elise. Professor Chen made a dismissive sound. Veronica Ashford plays everything exactly like her mother taught her. Perfect technique. Zero personality. She'll play her Rachmaninoff tonight, and it will be technically flawless and emotionally empty. Is that what you want? To play it safe and boring? No, then stop worrying about making a mistake or two. Mistakes happen. Even Horowitz made mistakes. What matters is the music, the feeling, the story you're telling. She stood up and headed for the door, then paused. Your grandmother. She's the one who taught you. Maya nodded. Then play for her tonight. Not for Veronica, not for the faculty, not for anyone else in that audience. Play for the woman who taught you to love music. Everything else will take care of itself. After Professor Chen left, Maya sat at the piano for a long moment. Then she played through her piece one more time, not worrying about perfection, just feeling the music. When she finished, she felt calmer than she had all day. She spent the rest of the afternoon trying to distract herself. She took a long shower, did her hair, and carefully put on the dress Christina had lent her. It fit perfectly, and when she looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. She looked like she belonged in that showcase, like she was supposed to be on that stage. At 6 o'clock, she headed over to the concert hall. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Students were already arriving, dressed in their performance clothes, carrying instrument cases, faces tight with nerves and excitement. The backstage area was chaos. Students warming up, parents fussing over their children, faculty members checking schedules and making last-minute adjustments. Maya found a quiet corner and tried to stay out of the way. Her hands were shaking and her mouth was dry. She pulled out a water bottle and took a sip, trying to calm her racing heart. Well. Look at you. Maya turned to find Veronica standing there in an absolutely stunning black gown that probably cost more than a semester of tuition. Her hair was swept up in an elegant style, and she wore diamond earrings that caught the light every time she moved. That's actually a nice dress, Veronica said, sounding almost surprised. Did you borrow it? Maya lifted her chin. Yes, I did. A friend lent it to me. How sweet. Veronica's smile was sharp. You know, I've been thinking about what you might play tonight. I asked around, and nobody seems to know. That's very mysterious of you. I wanted it to be a surprise. I hope you're not planning to try anything too ambitious, Veronica said, adjusting her earrings. It would be embarrassing to attempt something difficult and fail, especially after my Rachmaninoff. The comparison would be unfortunate. Before Maya could respond, the stage manager called out, 15 minutes to curtain. All performers, please check in with me to confirm you're here. Veronica smoothed down her dress. Well, I suppose I'll see you out there. Break a leg, Maya. You're going to need all the luck you can get. She walked away, leaving Maya standing alone in the corner, her confidence shaken all over again. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should have chosen something safer. La Campanella was notoriously difficult. Professional pianists had trouble with it. What made her think she could pull it off? Hey! Leo appeared at her elbow, looking uncomfortable in a suit and tie. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just nervous, Maya managed to say. Join the club. I think I'm sweating through my shirt already and I don't go on for another hour. He glanced toward where Veronica had disappeared. She'll say something to you. Nothing I haven't heard before. Leo studied her face. Look, I know I've only known you for a few days, but here's what I've learned. You're good. Like really good. Better than most of the people performing tonight. So stop letting Veronica Ashford get in your head. She might have a famous mom and expensive dresses, but you've got something she'll never have. What's that? Heart, Leo said simply. Soul, whatever you want to call it. That thing that makes music more than just hitting the right notes. So go out there and show everyone what real music sounds like. The stage manager called for beginners, and the energy backstage shifted. Students lined up in performance order. Instruments were tuned one last time. Sheet music was shuffled nervously. Maya found her place at the back of the line, right behind Veronica. Through the curtain, she could hear the audience settling into their seats. The murmur of conversation, the rustle of programs, the occasional laugh. Her palms were sweating. She wiped them on her dress and immediately regretted it, hoping she hadn't left marks on the borrowed fabric. Director Hammond walked out onto the stage, and the audience applauded. Maya couldn't hear his opening remarks over the pounding of her heart. This was it. In just a few hours, she'd be walking out onto that stage, and everything would change. One way or another, everything would change. The first student walked onto the stage, a violinist named Rachel whom Maya recognized from her music theory class. The audience applauded politely as she settled into position. Then the first notes of Vivaldi's Spring filled the concert hall, and Maya felt her stomach twist into tighter knots. She stood backstage, watching through the gap in the curtains as performer after performer took their turn. A cellist playing Bach, a pianist playing Mozart, a flutist playing Debussy. They were all good. Some were excellent. The parents in the audience beamed with pride, recording videos on their phones despite the signs asking them not to, with each performance. Maya felt smaller and more out of place. These students had trained at prestigious schools before coming here. They'd had private instructors since they were children. They'd performed at recitals in front of audiences hundreds of times. What did she have? A dead grandmother's old lessons and a dream that was starting to feel more like foolishness. Leo went on about halfway through. He played a Chopin nocturne, and it was beautiful. His fingers moved across the keys with confidence, and when he finished, the applause was enthusiastic. He walked off stage with a huge smile, pumping his fist in victory once he was safely behind the curtain. When he saw Maya, he gave her a thumbs up and mouthed, "You got this?" But did she? Maya wasn't so sure anymore. The line kept moving. Fewer and fewer students stood between her and the stage. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She tried the breathing exercises her grandmother had taught her. In 4 for counts, hold for 4, out for 4. But it wasn't working. Her chest felt tight. She could hear her pulse pounding in her ears. Then it was Veronica's turn. Maya watched as Veronica walked onto the stage like she owned it. Her head was held high. Her posture was perfect. She settled onto the piano bench with the kind of confidence that only came from years of performing. She adjusted the bench slightly, flexed her fingers, and then began to play. The Rachmaninoff Prelude in C-sharp minor, one of the most famous and dramatic pieces in the piano repertoire. And Veronica played it brilliantly. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and speed. Every note was exactly where it should be, every dynamic perfectly controlled. The famous opening chords rang out with power, and the intricate passages that followed were executed flawlessly. Maya felt her heart sink. It was perfect. Technically, absolutely perfect. The audience was entranced. She could see people in the front rows leaning forward in their seats, completely captivated. When Veronica finished, the applause was thunderous. People actually stood up. A standing ovation. Veronica rose from the bench and bowed gracefully, accepting the applause with a smile that managed to look both humble and triumphant at the same time. Her mother was in the 3rd row, beaming with pride. Director Hammond was applauding enthusiastically from his seat in the front. Veronica walked off stage, passing Maya in the wings. She paused for just a moment. "Good luck following that," she whispered, her eyes gleaming. Then she was gone, swept up by her friends who were gushing about her performance. Maya stood frozen. Her legs felt like they might give out. How was she supposed to follow that? Professor Chen's words came back to her. Perfect technique, 0 personality. But the audience didn't seem to care about personality. They'd loved it. They'd given her a standing ovation. Maya Chen, the stage manager, said quietly. "You're up." This was it. No more time to panic, no more time to doubt. Maya took a deep breath and stepped toward the stage entrance. The stage manager gave her an encouraging pat on the shoulder. "Break a leg, kid." Maya walked out onto the stage, and the bright lights hit her like a physical force. She couldn't see the audience beyond the first few rows, which was probably a blessing. She could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, though, watching, judging, comparing her to everything they'd just seen. She heard the whispers start almost immediately. Not loud enough for most people to hear, but Maya's ears were sharp, and she was hypersensitive to every sound. Who is she? Is that the scholarship girl? This should be interesting. Maya made her way to the piano. The Steinway Grand looked massive under the stage lights, elegant and intimidating. She sat down on the bench and adjusted it to her height just like she'd practiced. Her hands were trembling as she placed them in her lap. She looked out at the audience. She could see Veronica sitting in the third row, arms crossed, that same smug smile on her face. She could see Director Hammond with his notepad, ready to evaluate her performance. She could see Leo giving her an encouraging nod from his seat. She could see Christina, her Ra, who'd lent her the dress, sitting near the back with her fingers crossed. But most of all, she felt her grandmother's absence like a physical ache. Her grandmother wasn't here to see this, would never see this. Maya had dreamed about this moment for so long, imagined her grandmother in the audience, proud and teary-eyed. But that would never happen. For a moment, Maya thought she might actually get up and run off the stage. The fear was overwhelming. The pressure was crushing. She was about to play one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written. Immediately, after a flawless performance by the daughter of a world-famous pianist, in front of an audience full of experts who were probably already writing her off as the charity case who was in over her head. Then she heard her grandmother's voice in her head, as clear as if the old woman was sitting right next to her. "Mia, music is not about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about opening your heart and letting people see what's inside. That's all. Just show them your heart." Maya closed her eyes. She let the fear wash over her and then flow away. She thought about her grandmother's tiny apartment, about the old upright piano with the sticky keys, about winter evenings when they'd practiced together, her grandmother's weathered hands guiding hers, teaching her not just the notes, but the soul behind them. She thought about why she'd chosen La Campanella. Not because it was difficult, though it was. Not to show off, though it would certainly do that if she could pull it off. She'd chosen it because it was her grandmother's favorite piece. Because her grandmother used to play it in that tiny apartment, and the neighbors would open their windows to listen. Because her grandmother had told her that this piece was like life itself, difficult, beautiful, full of joy and sadness all mixed together. Maya opened her eyes. She placed her hands on the keys, and she began to play. The opening notes of La Campanella rang out clear and pure. The piece was called The Little Bell, and it was meant to sound like bells ringing. Maya's fingers found the notes instinctively, all the hours of practice paying off. But she wasn't thinking about technique anymore. She wasn't thinking about Veronica or the audience or anything except the music. The piece began gently, almost playfully, the melody dancing in light. Maya's hands moved across the keys with growing confidence. The opening section flowed into the main theme, and here's where the difficulty really started. The famous octave jumps that had broken so many pianists, the rapid runs that required absolute precision, the trills that needed to sound like bells, clear and bright. Maya played them all. Not perfectly. There was a slight hesitation in one of the runs, a trill that wasn't quite as clean as it could have been. But she played with something more important than perfection. She played with feeling, with love, with joy. The piece built in intensity, the melody growing more complex, the technical demands increasing. Maya's fingers flew across the keys, hitting the rapid-fire notes that made La Campanella famous. Her whole body was involved in the performance, swaying with the music, feeling every note, not just in her fingers, but in her entire being. In the audience, people had stopped whispering. They sat forward in their seats, caught up in something unexpected. This wasn't just a student recital anymore. this was different. This was music that spoke to something deeper than technique. Director Hammond's pen had stopped moving on his notepad. He was just listening, his mouth slightly open in surprise. Veronica's smug smile had faded. She sat rigid in her seat, knuckles white as she gripped the armrests. Leo was grinning so wide his face hurt. But Maya didn't see any of this. She was lost in the music now, playing not for them but for her grandmother. Every note was a memory. Every phrase was a thank you. Every passage was an I love you that she'd never gotten to say. Enough times when her grandmother was alive, the piece moved into its most technically challenging section. The rapid octaves, the impossible leaps, the passages that required the hands to cross over each other at breakneck speed. Maya's hands were a blur of motion, but somehow every note rang out clear and true. She hit a particularly difficult sequence, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she marveled that her fingers were actually doing this, actually pulling it off. Then came the moment she'd been most afraid of. The section that had given her trouble, even in practice. A series of rapid trills followed by massive jumps across the keyboard. She'd missed it in practice more times than she could count. But tonight, with the stage lights blazing and her heart open, her fingers found the notes as if they'd been waiting there all along. The piece was building to its climax now. The music grew louder, more intense, the bells ringing with increasing urgency and joy. Maya's fingers were starting to ache, but she pushed through. Almost there. Just a little more, and then the final cascade of notes. A spectacular run down the keyboard, followed by the triumphant final chords. Maya's hands came down on those final notes with all the emotion she'd been holding inside. The sound filled the concert hall, ringing out like actual bells, now beautiful and pure and real. The last note faded into silence. Maya sat at the piano, her chest heaving, her hands still on the keys. For 3 full seconds, there was nothing but silence. Complete, absolute silence. And then the world exploded. The applause started like thunder rolling in from a distance, then crashed over her in a wave. Maya lifted her eyes from the keys, startled, and saw the entire audience on their feet. Every single person. Students, parents, faculty, everyone. They were clapping and cheering, and some people were actually shouting. Maya stood up from the bench, feeling dizzy and disconnected from her body. Had that really just happened? Had she really just played La Campanella in front of all these people? Her hands were shaking worse than before. But now it was from adrenaline and relief rather than fear. She took a bow, her legs feeling unsteady. The applause didn't stop. If anything, it got louder. She could see Leo on his feet, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt, yelling, "Yes," with a huge grin on his face. She could see Christina wiping tears from her eyes. She could see Professor Chen in the faculty section, nodding with what looked like satisfaction and maybe even pride, and she could see Veronica, still seated while everyone around her stood, her face pale and her jaw tight. Their eyes met for just a second, and Maya saw something there she hadn't expected. Not anger or contempt, but something that looked almost like shock. Like Veronica was being forced to reconsider everything she thought she knew. Maya bowed again and walked off stage, her legs barely holding her up. The moment she got into the wings out of sight of the audience, her knees buckled. The stage manager caught her arm. "Easy there," he said with a kind smile. "That happens. The adrenaline dump. You were incredible, by the way. In my 15 years doing this job, I've never seen an opening showcase performance like that." Maya couldn't speak. She could only nod. Her hands were trembling so badly, she had to clasp them together. The applause was still going on out there. She could hear Director Hammond's voice through the sound system, trying to calm everyone down so they could continue with the rest of the program. But there were no more performances. She'd been the last one. The showcase was over. Students started flooding backstage, and suddenly Maya was surrounded by people. Faces she didn't know, students she'd never spoken to. All of them congratulating her, asking questions, wanting to know where she'd trained, how long she'd been playing. That was insane. How did you even learn that piece? "You have to teach me that trill section." Maya tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. She felt overwhelmed, like she might cry or laugh, or maybe both at the same time. Then Leo pushed through the crowd and pulled her into a hug. He said, practically bouncing with excitement, "I told you that you were good. That was beyond good. That was... I don't even have words. That was legendary." Christina found her next, still crying. "That dress brought you luck," she said, squeezing Maya's hands. "Or maybe you just brought yourself luck. Either way, that was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years." Professor Chen appeared, and the other students instinctively moved aside to let her through. She looked at Maya with those sharp eyes, and for a moment, Maya was terrified that she was about to hear everything she'd done wrong. Instead, Professor Chen said, "Your grandmother taught you well. She would be very proud." Then she did something Maya had never seen her do before. She smiled. Really smiled. "Come see me Monday morning. We need to discuss your curriculum. You're beyond the standard first-year track." More people kept coming. Parents of other students, asking for her name, wanting to know about her background. A man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as a concert promoter, asking if she had representation and handing her a business card. A woman who ran a music festival asking if she'd be interested in performing next summer. It was all too much. Maya felt like she was drowning in attention and praise. She excused herself and slipped away, finding a quiet hallway where she could finally breathe. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, trying to process everything that had just happened. That was quite a performance. Maya opened her eyes to find Veronica standing there. She'd taken off her heels and was carrying them in one hand. Without the extra height and the perfect posture, she looked smaller somehow, more human. Maya tensed, waiting for the insult, the cutting remark. But Veronica just stood there, looking tired and oddly vulnerable. "I didn't think you had it in you," Veronica said finally. "When I saw you that first day with your stained shirt and your old backpack, I thought a lot of things. And I was wrong." She took a breath. "That was the most beautiful performance I've ever heard. Better than anything I've ever played. Better than anything my mother has played." Maya didn't know what to say. Of all the things she'd expected tonight, a genuine compliment from Veronica Ashford wasn't one of them. "I've been cruel to you," Veronica continued, her voice quieter now. "I've been cruel because I was threatened. Because you reminded me that all my expensive lessons and famous last name don't actually mean anything if I can't make people feel what you just made them feel. So I tried to make you feel small instead." She looked down at her shoes. "That was wrong. I'm sorry." "Thank you," Maya said, surprised by her own voice. "For saying that?" Veronica nodded. She started to walk away, then paused. "Your grandmother. The one who taught you. She must have been an incredible teacher." "She was," Maya said softly. "She was just a housekeeper, you know. Never went to fancy schools or played in famous concert halls. But she understood music in a way that, in a way that was real. She taught you something my expensive instructors never taught me," Veronica said. "She taught you that music is supposed to make people feel something. All I know how to do is play the notes correctly." She gave Maya a sad smile. "Maybe you could teach me sometime. How to do what you do." "Maybe," Maya said, and found that she meant it. Veronica walked away, leaving Maya alone in the quiet hallway. The sounds of the reception starting in the grand hall echoed distantly. Maya pulled out her phone and looked at the photo of her grandmother one more time. "We did it, Abuela," she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Just like you always knew we would." Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Everyone's calling me. They saw videos. Baby, I'm so proud. Your grandmother is smiling down on you right now." Videos. Maya hadn't even thought about that. She opened social media and found that clips of her performance were already spreading. Someone had recorded the whole thing and posted it. It already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments. "This girl is incredible. Who is she? This made me cry. That trill section was insane. This is what real talent looks like." Maya closed the app, feeling overwhelmed again. She wasn't ready for all this attention. She just wanted to call her mom, go back to her dorm room, and sleep for about 12 hours. But first, she had to get through the reception. She made her way back to the grand hall, where the atmosphere was completely different from that first day. Students were still clustered in groups, but now those groups included Maya. People kept approaching her, introducing themselves, asking her to sit with them. The parents wanted to talk to her, asking about her training, her plans for the future. Director Hammond found her by the refreshment table and shook her hand warmly. "Miss Chen, that was extraordinary. We're going to want to feature you in our spring concert series, and I'll be recommending you for several competitions and scholarship opportunities. You have a very bright future ahead of you." Leo brought her a plate of food, insisting she needed to eat something before she passed out. They sat together at one of the round tables, and slowly a group formed around them. Friendly faces, genuine smiles, people who wanted to know her not because of what she could do for them, but because they recognized something real in her music. As the evening wound down and people started to leave, Maya found herself standing alone by the window, looking out at the darkened campus. The practice hall was lit up across the lawn, and she could see someone moving around inside, probably already practicing for their next performance. Christina came up beside her. "So, how does it feel? To go from invisible to the talk of the entire conservatory in one night?" "Surreal," Maya admitted. "Kind of terrifying, honestly. What if I can't do it again? What if tonight was just luck?" "It wasn't luck," Christina said firmly. "That was years of work and dedication and love for music. That doesn't just disappear overnight." She put a hand on Maya's shoulder. "But I get it. The pressure's different now. People have expectations. Just remember why you play. Remember what your grandmother taught you. As long as you hold on to that, you'll be fine."